Picture yourself crossing a frozen desert where the cold numbs even your thoughts, and one wrong move could trap you beneath an avalanche. Now picture doing that aboard machines so small they look almost like toys. Yet these were engineered for real military missions in some of the most unforgiving places on Earth. These compact beasts challenged logic, physics, and even nature itself. And here's the strange part: almost nobody knows about them. You won't spot them in war movies or grand military parades. But they carried soldiers, weapons, and gear through icy forests, blocked trails, and snow-covered fields. Have you ever heard of a tank the size of a bike? Or a snow machine light enough to fit in a helicopter and carry troops on secret Arctic patrols? Get ready to uncover the smallest off-road snow vehicles you've likely never seen. Stay until the end, because the final one feels like it came out of science fiction yet it fought in real combat. And believe it or not, it's so old most of you weren't even born when it first appeared. But if you were, drop a comment below. I'd love to know who actually witnessed that era. Let's dive in. Hägglunds Bv 206. At first glance, you might look at it and say, this thing is way too small for combat. But that's where the surprise comes in. The Hägglunds Bv 206, better known as the Bv 106, turned out to be one of Sweden's most effective military vehicles, not because of its size, but precisely because it was compact, lightweight, and incredibly versatile. It wasn't built to intimidate or to look powerful in parades. It was designed to solve a real problem: how to move soldiers and supplies through terrain so hostile that even the largest tanks and trucks would become useless. Developed in the 1980s during the height of the Cold War, the Bv 206 answered a very specific military requirement: cross deep snow, frozen forests, and marshy tundra quickly and reliably, without relying on prepared roads or heavy infrastructure. Just as important, it had to be light enough to be airlifted by helicopter and deployed directly into mountainous combat zones. That meant it had to combine strength with agility in a way no other vehicle had before. The Bv 206 measured about 7 meters long when counting both of its articulated units, yet remained only 1.8 meters wide, narrow enough to slip through forest trails or rocky passes where other vehicles couldn't even turn. Despite its length, it weighed less than 5 tons, which gave it an extraordinary advantage. Instead of sinking into deep snow like a heavy tank, it actually floated across the surface thanks to its wide, low-pressure tracks. Power came from a 2.8-liter inline-6 gasoline engine producing around 120 horsepower, which might not sound like much compared to heavy armor, but it was more than enough to move the entire setup, carrying up to 17 fully equipped soldiers and their gear. The real genius, though, wasn't in horsepower, it was in maneuverability. The two connected sections of the Bv 206 were articulated, meaning they could bend and pivot independently. This gave the vehicle unmatched mobility on uneven ground. Where larger machines would stall or get trapped, the Bv 206 could twist its way up steep slopes, crawl over rocks, or snake through dense forests without needing to bulldoze a trail first. That flexibility made it indispensable for a variety of missions. It could carry troops on long Arctic patrols, haul critical supplies into remote mountain outposts, or evacuate wounded soldiers from terrain no ambulance could ever reach. It was equally valuable in non-combat roles. Search and rescue teams used it in the frozen wilderness, peacekeeping forces relied on it in remote regions, and ski resorts even adapted versions to haul staff and equipment to peaks that were otherwise inaccessible. Here's a fun detail: the Bv 206 wasn't only used by Sweden. British forces adopted it for Arctic deployments, while civilian teams in Antarctica used it for exploration and rescue missions in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Wherever snow, ice, or swamps made other vehicles useless, the Bv 206 proved unstoppable. Small, light, and remarkably adaptable, it was a machine built to defy nature itself. Where heavy tanks would sink and fail, the Bv 206 simply kept moving. And if you thought that was clever, wait until you see the next compact snow crawler built in Canada, just as tough, and with an entirely different design. Bombardier Muskeg. Built in Canada, just as compact and designed to dominate the snow but with a completely different look. Meet the Bombardier Muskeg. At first glance, it may seem like nothing more than a tractor on tracks, a simple utility vehicle with no frills. But don't let appearances fool you. The Bombardier Muskeg is one of the earliest and clearest examples of how a small, rugged, and intelligently designed machine could turn into a logistical powerhouse in frozen and unforgiving environments. Developed in Canada during the 1950s, the Muskeg didn't impress with raw size or speed. Instead, it became legendary for what it could accomplish precisely because of its compact build. Built by Bombardier, the same company that would later become famous for producing airplanes, trains, and snowmobiles, the Muskeg was designed to fill a vital gap, moving people and cargo through deep snow, ice fields, and mud swamps where traditional trucks and jeeps would be completely useless. The military quickly recognized its potential. Adapted for tactical and logistical missions, the Muskeg became an essential support vehicle in remote snowy regions. At just over 4 meters long and 2 meters wide, it was small enough to maneuver through narrow forest paths, squeeze between trees, or climb icy hillsides that would stop larger machines cold. Its compact design meant it could be parked, hidden, or repositioned with ease, qualities that made it especially valuable for operations where mobility and stealth were key. Under the hood, the Muskeg packed a 3.9-liter gasoline straight-six engine, producing about 140 horsepower. While it wasn't built to race across the tundra, speed was never the goal. Its true strength lay in traction. The wide rear tracks gripped snow and ice with steady consistency, while the lightweight front end allowed it to make sharp turns and precise movements even in slippery terrain. Combined with its relatively low overall weight, the Muskeg could be airlifted or transported into remote areas without requiring large-scale infrastructure, something that gave it enormous strategic value during Cold War deployments in the Canadian North. But the Muskeg wasn't just about moving gear. It had a unique role that earned it a reputation as a lifesaver in the most extreme conditions. In northern Canada, these vehicles were often sent out as snow scouts, moving ahead of convoys to test the strength of ice on frozen lakes or rivers. Their wide tracks and lightweight construction let them tread softly, spreading their weight so evenly that they could skim across unstable snow layers where heavier vehicles would break through. In this way, the Muskeg acted as both a guide and a shield, paving the way for larger convoys to pass safely behind. And life inside the Muskeg wasn't as brutal as the conditions outside. With its fully enclosed and heated cabin, operators could work in comfort even when temperatures plunged to 40 degrees, ensuring missions didn't grind to a halt when nature turned hostile. In the vast, frozen wilderness, the Muskeg wasn't just a tool, it was often the difference between life and death. It was never the biggest. It was never the fastest. But in extreme Arctic conditions, its small size and adaptability became its greatest strengths. A machine built not for show, but for survival. And if Canada mastered the art of building compact vehicles to conquer the cold, the next entry came from the Soviet Union, where a different kind of small-tracked machine would help shape battles in frozen terrain. STZ-5. From the very first glance, the STZ-5 makes an impression. Low-slung, compact, fully enclosed, with wide steel tracks and a narrow, rugged cab that looks almost like a miniature armored truck. Unlike many small-tracked machines of its era, this one was never an agricultural vehicle adapted for war. It was purpose-built for military service right from the drawing board. Conceived in the early 1930s by the Soviet Union, the STZ-5 was designed to solve a simple but critical problem: how to move supplies, ammunition, and light artillery through deep snow, swampy mud, and dense forest where traditional wheeled vehicles would fail completely. Measuring just over 4.5 meters long and about 2 meters wide, the STZ-5 was compact enough to weave through woodland trails, maneuver between ruined buildings, or even conceal itself behind natural cover. That ability to stay hidden was often just as valuable as its ability to move. Its tall, boxy cab was built with reinforced steel panels, giving crews modest protection against snow, sleet, and even fragments of shrapnel on the battlefield. For soldiers operating in freezing winds and constant shellfire, that cab meant both shelter and survival. Under its hood sat a 4.4-liter, four-cylinder gasoline engine producing roughly 50 horsepower. Not much on paper, but in practice it was more than enough for its role. This was not a speed machine. It topped out at around 25 km/h, but what it lacked in velocity it made up for in sheer stubborn reliability. Even in the brutal winters of the Soviet front, when oil thickened and metal snapped in sub-zero temperatures, the STZ-5 kept moving. It was engineered to be simple to maintain, easy to repair in the field, and rugged enough to endure endless punishment. During World War II, especially in desperate campaigns like the defense of Moscow and the long battles across the Eastern Front, the STZ-5 proved indispensable. It towed anti-tank guns and light field artillery, hauled ammunition and fuel crates, and ferried troops across icy terrain where heavier tracked machines would simply sink. For Soviet commanders, the STZ-5 was like a compact lifeline, small enough to reach forward positions yet strong enough to bring along the firepower that infantry desperately needed. One of its greatest strengths, however, was camouflage. Because of its low profile and relatively small size, the STZ-5 could disappear into its environment. Crews would cover it with snow, branches, or camouflage nets, hiding it until the moment came to act. At night, it could slip into a new position almost silently, dragging artillery behind it to surprise enemy forces. This mobility allowed Soviet troops to practice what was essentially guerrilla warfare, with artillery moving a gun into position under cover of darkness, firing, and vanishing before the enemy could retaliate. There are stories from winter operations where Soviet soldiers used the STZ-5 as a mobile ambush platform. They would conceal it under snowbanks or netting, wait for enemy convoys to approach, and then suddenly pull a hidden cannon into firing position using the STZ. Within seconds, shells were flying before the enemy even realized a trap had been sprung. Without a vehicle as compact and nimble as the STZ-5, that kind of battlefield trickery would have been impossible. It may look primitive by modern standards, but during its time the STZ-5 was a revolutionary little workhorse, a true military pickup truck that thrived where larger and heavier machines bogged down. It wasn't glamorous, but it was dependable, versatile, and deadly in the hands of resourceful Soviet troops. And if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying this ride through the smallest beasts ever built to crush snow and ice. So don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell, because the next machine on this list is even more compact, even more ingenious, and it took Soviet mobility in frozen terrain to an entirely new level. Hägglunds Bv 202. A Swedish crawler, articulated, narrow, and almost whisper silent, that became the gold standard in snow mobility, the Hägglunds Bv 102. At first glance, it looks like a snow centipede, with its two articulated sections linked together in perfect rhythm. Small, flexible, and surprisingly versatile, the Bv 102, built in Sweden during the 1960s, was one of the most ingenious military vehicles of its era. It's also a prime example of how compact size, when combined with clever engineering, can become a massive tactical advantage. Measuring around 6 meters in total length including both articulated units and just 1.9 meters wide, the Bv 202 was slim enough to weave through frozen forest trails that larger vehicles couldn't even attempt. Its articulation system ensured that both sections stayed in constant ground contact, giving it remarkable traction and stability whether it was crossing soft snow, cracked ice, or uneven tundra. Power came from a 2.2-liter, four-cylinder engine producing about 80 horsepower. Modest on paper, but when paired with wide, lightweight tracks, it was more than enough to carry troops, gear, or weapons through deep snow without sinking. Its small size gave it another critical edge: deployment flexibility. The Bv 202 could be airlifted by helicopter, dropped from a cargo plane, or towed in long convoys to forward positions. That made it ideal for reconnaissance missions, rapid troop movements, and supply runs in places where no road access existed. The interior was just as smartly designed. The front cab housed the driver and commander, while the rear unit was modular, adaptable for carrying soldiers, equipment, or even serving as an ambulance. With internal heating and thermal insulation, crews stayed shielded from freezing winds and sub-zero conditions. But what made the Bv-202 legendary was its stealth. Thanks to its quiet engine and light footprint, it could glide across snowy landscapes almost like a ghost. The low rumble of its motor and the soft hiss of its tracks blended seamlessly into the silence of the Arctic, allowing patrols to move unseen and unheard. Some variants were even fitted with radios and antennas, transforming them into mobile command posts for Arctic operations where communication lines were vital. Although it was eventually replaced in the 1980s by the larger and more powerful Bv-106, the Bv-202 remains a celebrated pioneer in cold weather mobility. Its small size wasn't a limitation, it was the very reason for its success. And if you think the Bv-202 takes us far back, just wait. The next machine on this list comes from 1918, at the very end of World War I. It looked like little more than a metal crate on tracks, but it marked America's very first attempt at building compact snow-capable armored vehicles. 3-ton 1918. You've probably never even heard of it. And if you have seen a picture, you might have thought, that looks like a toy tank. Honestly, you wouldn't be far off. The Ford 3-ton M1918 was the very first light armored vehicle ever mass-produced by the United States, and even today it remains one of the smallest track tanks ever fielded. Small in size, yes, but enormous in historical importance. Developed by Ford at the very end of World War I, the 3-ton was designed with a radical idea in mind: make a tank that was fast to build, easy to transport, and simple enough for almost anyone to operate. At the time, those qualities were unheard of. Measuring just 3.6 meters long and a little over 1.8 meters wide, it could slip through narrow passages, crawl over snow-crusted trenches, and push through muddy fields without requiring prepared roads. Its engine was borrowed straight from Ford's automobiles of the era, a 4-cylinder gasoline unit producing about 40 horsepower. Modest by today's standards, but enough to push the little tank up to 12 km/h. That was fast enough to keep pace with infantry while advancing under fire, which was exactly the role it was meant to fill. But the real secret of the 3-ton was its weight. At around 3 tons total, it was light enough to be lifted onto trucks or trains for rapid deployment, and it could handle terrain that heavier, bulkier tanks wouldn't dare attempt. Its small, low-slung profile also made it a difficult target, giving its 2-man crew, a driver and a gunner with a single-mounted machine gun, a fighting chance on the battlefield. So why does it earn a place in this list of snow vehicles? Because while it was originally built for muddy trench warfare, the 3-ton was also tested in cold weather environments, including training grounds in northern U.S. states and across parts of Canada. Frozen ground and light snow proved to be a perfect match for its lightweight, wide tracks, which distributed its weight evenly and kept it from sinking. In fact, it became a kind of training tank for winter combat, giving new recruits hands-on driving practice in snow before they ever touched a full-sized armored vehicle. Up close, it really does look like a steel toy, tiny compared to its lumbering contemporaries. But that was the genius of it. Built to fit the smallest possible footprint, it showed that sometimes less truly is more. Today, only a handful survive in museums, and people are always shocked when they see just how small it really is. And if you think this one was compact, just wait. The Soviets took the concept even further in the 1930s with the T-20 Komsomolets, an armored tractor that could carry soldiers straight to the front lines across snow-covered fields, frozen ditches, and narrow trails, all in a machine so compact it could slip through a wide alleyway. So, what lesson does the Ford 3-ton leave behind? That true power on the battlefield doesn't always roar in the form of towering armor or colossal cannons. Sometimes, it arrives in something so compact it could fit into a garage yet still reshape the fight. And that brings us to the end of this journey through history's smallest but most daring snow and off-road war machines. From vehicles that looked like toys to remote-controlled bombs on tracks, what you've witnessed wasn't a simple list, it was a glimpse into how far engineers were willing to push the limits of size, function, and fear. Because in the end, these machines weren't measured by their dimensions. They were measured by what they accomplished, whether it was carrying soldiers through impossible terrain, hauling supplies across battlefronts, rescuing comrades under fire, sneaking behind enemy lines, or delivering destruction at the push of a button. Now it's your turn. Out of all these bold creations, which one shocked you the most? If you could climb aboard, or even see one in action today, which would you pick? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this look at history's strangest, smallest war machines, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell. Because there are plenty more incredible machines waiting just around the corner. Until then, stay curious, and stay ready.